Okay, so Mizuoka's version of critical geopolitics was something of a departure from academic norms. Mizuoka is not satisfied with describing the world, he wants to change it. This then can be regarded as a fourth type of critical geopolitics. O'Toole identified the first three. Popular geopolitics, which looks at mass media, cinema, novels and cartoons. Practical geopolitics, which looks at the foreign policy bureaucracy and political institutions. And formal geopolitics, performed by think tanks, academia and strategic institutes. And then Nairu's gives us our fourth, dissident geopolitics, which doesn't like the current world order and wants to change things. Mizuoka's version of critical geopolitics falls into this category. Incidentally, the Lego thing is something I did for my book on geography and war. I couldn't get copyright release to use images from CNN and the like in my book, so I recreated them with Lego on my fictitious geography and war television news channel, GWNN. Anyway, here's Wolf Blitzer interviewing an expert whilst bestride Cyprus like a new colossus. Here is the Lego alter ego Fox Krieger. Now, similarly, you've seen Kaplan on Fareed Zakaria GPS already. Well, here he is recreated in Lego form. I don't know what I'd do without Photoshop. Anyway, back to Yves Lacoste. For Lacoste, geography had been understood as something that you did at school. It didn't require you to understand anything, you just remembered things. For each country, you'd remember its relief, its climate, its rivers, its vegetation, its agriculture, its population size and its main industries. For Lacoste, this is a complete misunderstanding of the nature of geography. The primary reason for geography exists is as a discipline to make war. Lacoste argues that geography has existed for as long as the apparatus of the state, and it had always been a means of control. He goes back to 446 BC, when Herodotus made his inquiries into the nature of the environment based on the designs of Athenian imperialism. It is interesting that Herodotus was to be used as the name of the main journal of critical geopolitics. Lacoste does acknowledge Eratosthenes as the person who coined the term geography, but argues that Herodotus was the first geographer, indeed a great geographer. Lacoste states that by the end of the 19th century, there were two geographies. The first was the geography of major states, which involved the collection and creation of maps and other information about space. This was used by the ruling classes as an instrument of power. The second was the geography of professors. This was an ideological discourse. Its unconscious function was to hide the strategic importance of reasoning about space. There is overlap between the two geographies. As Lacoste reminds us, the Chilean dictator General Augusto Pinochet was a geographer. In France, this changes in 1979 when Vietnam invaded Cambodia. In Le Monde, André Fontaine ran an editorial which caused something of a scandal. C'est de la géopolitique. It's geopolitics. Opinion leaders in France hadn't used that phrase since 1945 because of its association with the Nazis, which we've looked at in previous sessions. After this, a new generation of French journalists start using the phrase, regarding it as a new or scientific neutral term, regarding Vietnam and the Khmer Rouge, the revolution of Iran, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the Iran-Iraq war. They were all described in French newspapers as geopolitics. As a result, French academics start reclaiming the word. In the journal Hérodote, named for the first person Yves Lacoste regards as the first geographer, the term geopolitics was never used in its early years, but after 1981, it starts getting used regarding the Middle East, Islam, France, Africa, monsoon Asia, diasporas, Japan, the Caucasus, Central Africa, public health, China, ecology, water, Mediterranean region, mountains, globalization, drugs, aviation, English, Latin America, Turkey, cyberspace, energy, Vietnam, and all of those are looked at from the perspective of geopolitics. There's even a special issue on the geopolitics of geopolitics. Now, it's after this reclaiming of the term geopolitics in France that it starts taking on a new discourse in the English language, with the works of authors like Jerry O'Toole and John O'Loughlin. Within critical geopolitics, new spheres emerge, such as critical cartography, which looks at how maps are used to create reality. Feminist geopolitics, which looks at geopolitics not from the top down, but from the bottom up, and popular geopolitics, which argues that we can't just look at elite texts to understand geopolitics. Other researchers have developed new fields of anti-geopolitics, subaltern geopolitics, and Pacific geopolitics, which argues that instead of looking at geography and war, we should instead look at geography and peace. All of these new critical geopolitics are predicated in one of the few things that critical scholars and more realist scholars would agree with. The idea that the traditional form of geopolitics that draws on Ratzel, Kjellén and Haushofer, and that geopolitics that's taken so uncritically by Kaplan, is a pseudoscience. Morgenthau said in 1978 that geopolitics is a pseudoscience erecting the factor of geography into an absolute that's supposed to determine the power and hence the fate of nations. He's not alone. Many other authors have referred to geopolitics as a pseudoscience, like Bowman in 1942, Brock in 1943, Freeman in 1961, Fukushima in 1997, Walsh in 1948 said it was the greatest hoax of the century. Brock said we should leave the term geopolitics with all its odious connotations and simply speak of political geography. So the one area of consensus that unifies scholars from realist international relations and critical studies is that geopolitics is a pseudoscience. Yet many authors who should know better haven't quite realised this. Critical geopolitics gives us the tools to do lots of things, but we have to be careful with it. For some, it's sufficient to criticise the traditional form of geopolitics and find flaws with it. For others, that's not enough. Some believe you need to go further and not just describe the world, but to change it. As I want to demonstrate in the rest of the course, both of these approaches to critical geopolitics are fundamentally unsatisfactory. In coming sessions, I hope to explain why.